you, sir. You have some questions? Senator Nielsen.
This is an overriding question that never did get answered last year with the legislation. This emergency is triggered, is it not, by the declaration of the governor? Last year, the governor, after the legislation passed, did declare such an emergency. Was a new emergency, has one been declared this year, or are we still operating under last year's declaration?
The emergency was renewed in December. That continued many of the provisions that were in that original executive order end of last January, I believe.
And under my understanding, the governor has much broader authority now under that legislation to define and determine such an emergency, correct, than the governors previously have had, to declare an emergency, just period, an emergency, okay? The governors long had that authority, but now this is specific to a drought. That accorded him powers. My understanding that last year that extended his ability to, his or her, to determine and declare an emergency. Are those powers any greater or any diminished, do you know?
So I think that the December executive order was in line with what the January one in terms of its scope about that. Maybe you're talking about the interaction with Proposition 2 and the use of the reserve funds.
Well, let me go a little further then. Once this declaration is declared, that triggers the opportunity for the department to promulgate regulations, correct? That are exempt under that bill last year, exempt from the Office of Administrative Law Review. Isn't that correct?
Well, Senator Nielsen, by department, I'm guessing you may mean NIDE department. If so, let me respond this way.
Well, I thought it was more the board than the department that had that authority to promulgate regulations.
Within the existing proclamations and parallel orders are instructions to the board for emergency regulations around water use in the state. But I will also add that for our department, there are many valuable components in the governor's instruction, one of which is we've been told, and we take seriously, working with landowners. So we've gone to the Scott and Shasta tributaries in your district and negotiated over a dozen legal agreements to provide people protection from regulatory exposure during this time frame.
Yeah, and I give you credit for that, Director Bonham. You have worked on it. Now, the fundamental question then, so these regulations then are offered, put into effect, and they really have force and effect of law. Whenever the emergency terminates, and it has to have some period when there's no more emergency, correct? Now, does the governor have to declare that it is terminated, or how do we end the emergency?
So the emergency orders are usually for a set period of time, and so that will end. I think you're recalling, now I understand. So the change to the water rights emergency rule making last year that was very specific and tailored to drought. We have no proposal to change that, and and that is really only in times of drought. So when the drought ends, those emergency authorities to do things more quickly than we normally would at the water board would also end.
Do the regulations promulgated at that time extinguish also? They end.
Senator, I can't comment on the board's regulations, but I can tell you, having gone through this in other subject matter, with the Office of Administrative Law, you get two windows. You get an abbreviated window for emergency, which is a defined short time frame, and then you have an opportunity for an additional renewal period, assuming you can establish emergency. At some point on the back end, the agency is left with a question, promulgate permanent or not. That's standard practice under rulemaking under the OAL approach, as I understand it.
Okay. Well, it seems to me like that there must be an end to the regulation, though, that the regulation was specific for a circumstance, which now no longer exists. Therefore, the emergency regulation should not. Does that follow? That it ends, the regulation ends?
I understand the point you're making, Senator, and perhaps we could confer with the Water Board about their regulations and get back to you with that.
Yeah, I fear it's only a point that I'm making, but these regs allow now civil penalties to be informed too. So you have, you are the charging agency, you are the prosecutor, you are the adjudicator. Isn't that correct, either you or the board?
I disagree, Senator.
Okay.
For the following reasons. First, any penalty process at our department would remain subject to the state constitution, the federal constitution, the Administrative Procedures Act adjudicative rights of bills, or our Bill of Rights, excuse me, the applicable chapters of the Administrative Procedure Act, and for us to do it correctly would include these variables: separation of functions, so that the arbiter and the hearing officer are different and recused from each other, rules of evidence, either an option for an informal hearing or objection to that and therefore a formal hearing, training, and so forth, which is why I welcome being told in this trailer bill, do the regulations, because the approach in current law, the only other area I have penalty authority in, the language is department may do regulations. I actually think we should, and we should welcome public input from the potentially affected communities, and we should write down on paper the structure around due process rights. So I think this is actually a net improvement for those who are concerned about the department running amok on a few penalty authorities.
I'll have further questions.
Colleagues, any other questions from the committee? I know we have some folks who'd like to speak in public comment, which we will proceed to. Thank you, Director Bonham, and thank you, Ms. Bosler. Some more questions may arise, but we'll move to public comment at this point. I think we have a microphone here in the back.
That answers.
Sorry for the tight quarters. It's the way it is.
addressing the drought impact this is having on citizens and fish and wildlife throughout the state. This drought is affecting all of us, and we think there are some provisions in this bill that will really help communities that have been impacted significantly, others. But that being said, specifically, we have very specific concerns on the creation of new administrative civil penalties at the department. Generally, we have those concerns. Specifically on section 5901, there are tens of thousands of lawfully constructed bridges, culverts, and reservoirs throughout the state that could be viewed as creating impediments to fish passage. There's no clear definition of what constitutes an impediment, so all of the owners and managers of these structures now could be in a situation where they are at risk of having civil penalties applied because they are creating impediments to fish passage. I will say that we would much prefer a carrot versus a stick approach and agree that there needs to be improvements made to make sure that our fish and wildlife can remain abundant in California after this drought is. We hope that's sooner rather than later. For instance, if we could simplify the permitting process for upgrading these impediments, that would go a long way, providing funding to making improvements. We think there are real opportunities for partnership on improving the resources, and we'd much rather focus our efforts on that rather than punitive approaches. We'd also like to express concern with the provision of having the department be involved in the enforcement of water theft. We absolutely do not want to see water stolen. It impacts fish and wildlife just as it impacts our neighbors. We understand that the department oftentimes are the eyes and ears on the ground seeing these thefts occur, And we think it's appropriate that they work with the water board and ask the water board to issue the violation rather than them doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Testing. This one's a bit better.
Thank you.
I like green better anyways. Good afternoon, Pablo Garza with the Nature Conservancy, here in support of both bills. On the appropriations, I think we're all aware of the historic fourth-year drought and the impacts it's having to communities across the state, our economy, and fish and wildlife resources. So we think these are really important appropriations to make. We're particularly focused on the Department of Fish and Wildlife appropriations, but I think 9 agencies will receive funding through that bill, and I think it's an appropriate response to the crisis. On the trailer bill, which has been discussed, and particularly in the Department of Fish and Wildlife provisions, in our view, it's really more of a clarification or filling gaps in existing law to respond to illegal water diversions. And so we are supportive of those, and we think they are changes that should endure, that are, I think the crisis has brought focus to these gaps, but I don't think, it's authorities that should go away once the drought is over. I think enforcing against illegal water diversions is a good public policy. Leveraging the resources of fish and game wardens who are out in the field and can act as eyes and ears. It's consistent with how we act in other areas of law, and I think it's common sense. So thank you for the opportunity to make the comments.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kyle Jones with Sierra Club, California. We're in support of both the appropriations and the trailer bill. We fully support the authority for fish and wildlife for preventing illegal diversions. We'd also like to mention our support for the creation of the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions. One proposed change that we would have is regarding the Proposition 1E funding for flood control projects. We'd like to see a prioritization for multi-benefit flood control projects. An example would be a project that promotes a levee setback. These projects can create vital riparian habitat that is desperately needed for species, help with salmon rearing, and also provide opportunities for groundwater recharge. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Hello, Kelly Ditto on behalf of California League Conservation Voters and Clean Water Action. I want to express our strong support for emergency drought measures in this package that will provide food, shelter, and access to safe drinking water for thousands of California residents impacted by this historic drought. We commend leadership for addressing both the short and long-term challenges of the disadvantaged communities by creating the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions. This office would provide focus needed to identify, provide, and sustain safe drinking water for the nearly 500 California communities that need help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Regina Brown-Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director for California Black Media. I just wanted to speak to the $7.4 million that will be as suggested for additional funding for the Save Our Water campaign. We believe that this is a great thing, but we're also asking the committee to actually look at how these dollars are going to reach minority communities as well, to reach those residents. We also think that there may be a way that the department can actually work with organizations that are already on the ground and have existing infrastructures to reach these communities. So we believe that that will actually help penetrate the message much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown-Wilson.
Chair and members, Kathy Mossberg representing the California Association of Food Banks. We want to go on record in supporting this trailer bill and the appropriation, particularly the focus on the continued focus from the administration on emergency food assistance for those counties that are particularly affected by drought. We certainly know that we have hunger and security issues around the state, but we really appreciate within this package the focus on food insecurity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Omar Carrillo on behalf of EJCW, Environmental Justice Coalition for Water, Leadership Council, Community Water Center, and California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. We definitely support the drought package moving forward, and also continue to prioritize the needs of communities who have run out of water. So in moving forward, the proposal to develop an Office of Sustainable Water Solutions is one that's needed and critical. In addition to that, very targeted resources for those communities, specifically the private well owners and state smalls, very small communities of which are the most impacted right now in this drought. No water for drinking, bathing, restrooms, all that. And really, we need to have very targeted resources. One of the we also need to look at this package to see if it properly addresses the eligibility issues. So we have all this various resource, but we still are unclear if the eligibility of these very small communities has been addressed. So we encourage that to continue to be looked at. And lastly, in moving forward, more proactive drought approach would be to monitor groundwater levels and work within agencies. So we have DWR, the State Water Board, and other agencies that have resources to effectively think forward. This is an immediate issue, but we can also be not reactive, but we actually can plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo.
WR is representing Community Water Center. Community Water Center represents communities specifically throughout the Central Valley who are currently out of water. We support the establishment of an Office of Sustainable Water Solutions and the use of targeted resources, specifically cleanup and abatement funds for impacted communities throughout the state who are impacted by the drought. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in public comment? No, we have a motion on each of the bills by Senator Anderson. If there are no other questions, Senator Nielsen, you have a comment.
Yes, to the chair, are we allowed to proffer amendments today? Amendments to these bills, amendments?
I haven't seen any.
No, that is my question. Are we allowed to?
Do you have some?
I don't have any printed, no. And in this respect, I'll complain a little bit about the lack of simple time to analyze. We have had some. I appreciate that. It's better than usually. But it hasn't been enough time really to prepare and proffer amendments, to analyze amendments, to consider amendments. And what we are doing here is capitalizing agencies of government on an emergency situation to gain sweeping new powers. And wherein the members of the legislature don't even have an opportunity to offer any corrections or changes. It's kind of take our deal or walk. Mr. Chairman, that's not good open government. And we're talking about it here. I appreciate that. But where but here do members get to make amendments? There's no policy committee on this. Should have gone to a policy committee. Where do we get to make amendments?
This has been available since yesterday online, so public has been participating. This is the second hearing. The Assembly had a hearing earlier today. I don't believe there were any amendments discussed there. So not to shortcut or dismiss your concern, I think that any fine-tuning that you may identify in days to come, should this make it to the floor. Sure. I'm saying that concerns that Senator Nielsen may have, should they approach some sort of necessary additional work, can probably be done through the regulatory process. I don't know that we're going to need amendments to either of the bills before us right now. That's not to say that we all don't have the opportunity to work with the different departments and agencies involved to craft regulations as they unfold. But if something was identified as a necessary statutory change, that is always within our power here.
Let me then just kind of close on this note, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your usual courtesy. I argue that this is an issue of great magnitude, worthy of a lot more review and the opportunity to formally amend or change or fine-tune, if you will, the language in committee. And my clear understanding of the statute of last year was related to the board, and that authority accorded the board to a degree now, it looks like is being extended to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, is that these regulations proffered during the emergency declaration of the governor do not go through the Office of Administrative Law. So we did not have a chance to input it here. The public doesn't have an opportunity to go to the Office of Administrative Law and complain. Am I wrong in that interpretation?
The Water Board emergency regs are required to go to the OAL. That's my understanding.
Say that again?
The emergency regs that the Water Board has promulgated were required to go to the Office of Administrative Law. So that was still in place.
That, per that bill last year, 104 it was, I think?
Yes. And that bill last year is very narrowly focused on just when we are in drought times. And those regulations have expirations. So if the time has come that the snow and the rain is back, then we are no longer in a drought. We will no longer have that authority.
Okay, then the regulations, am I understanding this, that Mr. Bonham's saying that they will promulgate, those will extinguish whenever this drought ends?
Those are different. This is a different.
Okay, well, then that makes my point. Okay, we're given great authority. I'll say further of it in debate, but this is kind of an unfortunate process, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you doing the best you can, though.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. And again, you're certainly doing your job representing your constituents, as you always do. But I just want to underscore that Director Bonham was very articulate in his explanation of the extraordinarily narrow additional authority that this bill provides Department of Fish and Wildlife. So I would disagree with your assessment that this is very broad in its range and additional authority. I think it's very narrow and specific. But again, if there are concerns that you will have, we always have the opportunity to revisit. So with no further comments or questions from the committee, we do have motion from Senator Anderson, and we'll take we will take them separately if you like. So we'll first call the roll on AB 91.
The motion is do pass. Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Nielsen?
Not voting.
Ellen? Ellen, aye. Anderson? Anderson, aye. Bell? Bell, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Hancock, aye. Mitchell? Mitchell, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Morrell? Nguyen? Aye. Pan? Pan, aye. Pabley? Pabley, aye. Roth? Roth, aye. Stone? Woke? Woke, aye. That's 13-0.
That bill, AB 91, passes to the floor on a 13-0 vote, and now we'll call the roll on AB 92.
That motion is do pass. Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Nielsen? Nielsen, no. Ellen? Ellen, aye. Anderson? No. Anderson, no. Bell? Bell, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Hancock, aye. Mitchell? Mitchell, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Morrell? Morrell, no. Wynn? Wynn, no. Pan? Pan, aye. Pabley? Pabley, aye. Roth? Roth, aye. Stone? Woke? Woke, aye. 11-4.
The bill passes on an 11-4 vote without any other business before us. We are adjourned.